Your mind will either make you a trader or break you as one. Those words echoed in my head the first time I stepped into the market's battlefield, and even today they carry a strange weight, the kind that forces you to slow down, breathe deeper, and recognize that trading is not about charts, tools, or predictions. It's about who you become. Before strategies, before setups, before entries, there is the hidden war inside every trader's mind. And the moment you decide to think like a pro is the moment everything begins to change. Most retail traders lose within their first year. Most blow their accounts because of psychological mistakes, not strategy. Most never discover the mental tools professionals use daily. Why does this happen? Because almost everyone enters trading the same way, hungry for freedom, excited by opportunity, fueled by energy, but completely unprepared for the mental pressure that professionals have mastered over years of deliberate psychological conditioning. This is where the journey begins, the shift from emotional trading to engineered thinking. Pros don't rely on motivation, hype, or luck. They rely on structure. They rely on internal order. They rely on how they think. The mind of a professional trader is not something born, it's something built. Mark Douglas spent years explaining that trading is the only profession where you can be completely wrong and still make money. Yet that truth destroys the unprepared mind. The amateur thinks uncertainty is the enemy. The pro thinks uncertainty is the environment. One survives, one suffers. And the difference is not the strategy, it's the belief system behind the strategy. Here's the first pattern interrupt. Most traders think they need more information to win, but the pro trader goes in the opposite direction. Fewer inputs, deeper understanding, more internal clarity. When you try to chase every signal, every prediction, every trend, you fall into chaos. When you refine your thinking, everything slows down, decisions become cleaner, and the markets stop feeling like a storm and start behaving like a field you know how to walk through. Why do pros think differently? Because they understand the real enemy is not volatility, but internal friction. Neuroscience shows that stress narrows perception, reduces decision bandwidth, and amplifies impulsive action. When an amateur sees a sudden move, the brain floods with survival instincts. The pro's mind does something entirely different. It pauses, it evaluates, it responds without fear. This ability is not natural, it's trained. So what exactly do pros think about? They think about their process, not their outcome. They think about risk, not reward. They think about execution, not excitement. They think about probabilities, not perfection. Jesse Livermore repeatedly proved that the trader who chases excitement gets destroyed, but the trader who respects structure finds longevity. And longevity is the true definition of professional performance. The emotional transition begins when you realize the market isn't judging you, it's exposing you. Every weakness becomes visible the moment money is involved. Every impulsive habit, every fear, every hidden expectation, every false confidence. That's why the majority keep repeating the same mistakes. They want different results without becoming a different person. Professionals build identity first, skill second, results third. Identity is a powerful force. When you begin to see yourself as a calm, structured, probability-driven trader, your actions naturally follow that identity. Brian Tracy often said the mind obeys the dominant image you hold about yourself, and in trading, this is even more true. When you identify as someone disciplined, decisions align with discipline. When you identify as someone who trades based on mood, everything collapses the moment the mood shifts. So, how do you start becoming the trader who thinks like a pro? You start by accepting a hard truth. You are not fighting the market. You are training your mind to operate under conditions most humans avoid. You are learning to stay composed under uncertainty. You are learning to detach from temporary pain. You are learning to act without emotion. This is not about being perfect. It's about becoming stable. This is where the pro mindset starts to form. It forms in the quiet moments, not during big wins or big losses, but in the in-between spaces where your thoughts create your habits. When you sit with your emotions instead of reacting, when you let the chart breathe instead of forcing trades, when you wait for confirmation rather than chasing movement, every calm decision becomes a small piece of your new identity. And here's the most powerful shift. Once you begin thinking like a pro, you stop worshiping outcomes and start respecting behavior. You stop needing the market to prove your worth. You stop letting random movements control your mood. You become someone who shows up with clarity, trades with intention, and walks away with self-control. This is the foundation that every professional trader has built over time. The journey begins here.
You may not realize it yet, but the reason professional traders perform at a higher level is because they operate from an internal blueprint the average trader doesn't even know exists. It's a blueprint built from beliefs, habits, and mental models that protect decision-making under pressure. It's not about being smarter, it's about being structured. And the moment you understand this blueprint, everything in your trading changes. Why is the blueprint so important? Because without it, the mind becomes a battlefield of conflicting impulses. One part wants to wait for a perfect setup, and another part wants to jump early. One part wants to follow the plan, and another wants to react emotionally. One part wants long-term consistency, and another wants immediate gratification. This internal conflict destroys traders before the market ever does. Mark Douglas taught that consistency is built from beliefs, not strategies. If your core belief is that the market owes you something, you will behave like a gambler. If your core belief is that uncertainty is dangerous, you will micromanage every candle. If your core belief is that pain equals failure, you will exit at the worst moments. The blueprint begins when you change these internal expectations. Here's the first insight of the blueprint. Professionals trust probability more than emotion. Emotions come from memory, and memories are biased. Probabilities come from structure, and structure is neutral. When you understand this difference, panic loses its power. A losing trade no longer feels like a personal attack. A winning trade no longer feels like validation. Everything becomes part of the long game. But the blueprint doesn't stop there. It includes a powerful mental filter that pros use every day. They separate information from interpretation. The amateur sees a candle spike and interprets danger. The pro sees the same candle spike and interprets context. The difference lies in training the mind to evaluate the environment instead of reacting to the movement. Jesse Livermore knew this deeply. He built his career on understanding not what the market was doing in the moment, but what that moment meant within the entire structure. Every great trader eventually discovers that thinking like a pro means zooming out mentally before acting physically. Decisions become clearer because they are made from perspective, not pressure. Now comes the emotional transition. You begin realizing that your thoughts are not random, they follow patterns, and these patterns either sabotage your trading or support it. Every fear, every hesitation, every rush of greed is a pattern that can be rewired. Neuroscience confirms this. Repeated thoughts create neural pathways, and repeated neural pathways become automatic behaviors. When you shift the internal pattern, you shift the external performance. Identity plays a massive role here. The blueprint only works when you see yourself as someone worthy of executing it. If deep down you believe you are inconsistent, you will behave inconsistently. If you believe you are disciplined, your actions naturally align with discipline. Traders often look for motivation, but professionals rely on identity because identity creates automatic behavior. This is where you step into authority over your own decisions. You stop waiting for the market to calm down. You stop waiting for perfect setups. You stop waiting for confidence to magically appear. Pro traders know that confidence is built through execution, not emotion. Every time you act according to your blueprint, confidence strengthens. Every time you act out of fear, confidence weakens. But the blueprint also includes something unexpected: emotional neutrality. Not coldness, not detachment, neutrality. A state where you feel the emotion, but don't let it control the decision. Ed Sikuda embodied this approach. He understood that emotional mastery isn't about eliminating fear or greed. It's about preventing them from hijacking the mind during critical moments. The deeper you go into this blueprint, the more you realize that thinking like a pro is not about being perfect. It's about being prepared. It's about knowing how your mind behaves under stress. It's about removing the illusions that cause amateurs to panic. It's about trusting a process that works even when emotions don't. This is the psychological architecture that supports professional consistency. By the end of this part, your blueprint has already begun forming. You're starting to recognize your impulses. You're noticing your emotional signals. You're seeing how your beliefs shape your behavior. And you're beginning to understand the mental structure that pros protect at all costs.
Now the journey shifts into the core of every professional trader's performance: execution. You can have the best blueprint, the strongest mindset, and the deepest understanding of yourself, but if your execution is unstable, everything falls apart. Execution is where thought becomes action, and where action becomes identity. This is where most traders collapse and where professionals rise. Why does execution break down? Because the mind hates uncertainty. Neuroscience shows that the brain is wired to seek patterns and avoid unknowns. But trading is an environment built entirely on unknowns. The amateur tries to predict. The professional prepares. This is the mental separation that defines consistent execution. The pro trader's mind approaches execution with a long-term lens. They understand that a single trade means nothing. A losing day means nothing. A temporary drawdown means nothing. What matters is the behavior repeated over many trades. The amateur focuses on the next outcome. The pro focuses on the next decision. That single shift transforms performance. Here's a powerful interrupt pattern. You do not rise to the level of your strategy, you fall to the level of your self-control. That's why two traders using the same system can have completely different results. One executes with discipline and clarity. The other executes with fear and emotional pressure. The difference is the mind behind the strategy, not the strategy itself. Mark Douglas emphasized that execution becomes consistent only when you remove emotional attachment from outcomes. When you place a trade, your job ends and probability takes over. But most traders keep trying to control what cannot be controlled, and this breaks execution. Professionals accept randomness. Amateurs fight it. Acceptance leads to clarity. Resistance leads to chaos. Execution becomes even sharper when you integrate risk as a form of psychological protection. Jesse Livermore understood that risk isn't simply a number, it's a mental boundary. When risk is predefined, the mind relaxes. When risk is ignored, the mind panics. This is why pro traders always know exactly what they can lose before entering a trade. It creates mental freedom, not restriction. The emotional transition in execution is powerful. You begin noticing how your heart rate changes before a trade. You notice the tension in your body while waiting for confirmation. You notice the thoughts that appear the moment price moves against you. Professionals study these emotional cues like data. Amateurs ignore them, and what you ignore eventually controls you. Identity also shapes execution. When you identify as someone disciplined, every decision becomes a reflection of that identity. When you identify as someone who trades from emotion, every slight change in price triggers impulsive action. Brian Tracy's work on self-concept explains this clearly. Behavior always returns to identity. If you want consistent execution, you become the trader who executes consistently. Execution requires a powerful habit: pausing, not hesitating, pausing. Professionals pause before they act. They pause before they react. They pause before they adjust risk.
That pause creates space, and in that space, you regain control. Neuroscience calls this the interruption of the emotional loop. It breaks impulsive patterns and opens up logical decision-making. This is where pros separate themselves from everyone else. They follow the process even during frustration. They follow the plan even during boredom. They follow risk even during temptation. Execution is not about comfort, it's about consistency. Comfort seeks safety. Consistency seeks structure. And structure is what protects you in the long run. The trap most traders fall into is chasing certainty. They want the market to feel safe before they execute. They want confirmation not because it improves the trade, but because it soothes emotion. Professionals execute based on rules, not feelings. The rules do not change based on mood. The execution does not change based on fear. The process stays stable even when the environment doesn't. As you internalize this level of execution, you begin to feel a shift. You feel less pressured by the market's movement. You feel more confident in your actions. You feel more composed during uncertainty. This is not luck, it is psychological evolution.
Emotional dominance is not suppression. It's not pretending you don't feel fear or greed. It's the ability to stay in control even while emotion exists. It's the ability to let the market move without letting it move you. This is where amateurs disappear and where professionals become unstoppable. Why is emotional dominance so important? Because every decision in trading is filtered through emotion before it becomes action. If the emotion is unstable, the action becomes unstable. If the emotion is calm, the action becomes strategic. Neuroscience proves that emotional centers activate before logical thinking. The pro trader learns to manage this activation instead of being controlled by it. The first secret of emotional dominance is awareness. Most traders feel emotions but never observe them. Professionals do the opposite. They watch their emotions as if studying another person. They notice tension. They notice impulses. They notice internal resistance. This self-observation weakens the emotional grip and strengthens mental clarity. A powerful pattern interrupt appears here. Emotional reactions are not caused by the market, they're caused by unresolved expectations. If you expect the trade to move instantly, every delay feels like pain. If you expect the market to reward your effort, every loss feels unfair. If you expect perfection, every mistake becomes personal. Professionals remove expectations and replace them with probabilities. Ed Sykota mastered emotional neutrality by building habits that separated him from emotional triggers. He understood that the market does not care about our feelings. It does not respond to our confidence. It does not reward our excitement. It responds only to structure. When you finally accept this truth, emotional storms become easier to handle because you stop expecting stability from an inherently unstable environment. Emotional dominance also comes from mastering the exit. Most traders think entries create emotion, but entries only create anticipation. Exits create identity. Exiting too early reflects fear. Exiting too late reflects greed. Exiting according to the plan reflects mastery. Professionals build their emotional strength through consistent exits, not by chasing perfect entries. This is where the emotional transformation deepens. Instead of resisting fear, you begin interpreting it. Instead of fighting anxiety, you learn from it. Instead of suppressing greed, you understand the belief behind it. Fear often comes from lack of clarity. Anxiety comes from lack of structure. Greed comes from lack of boundaries. When you address the cause, the emotion loses power. Identity becomes essential again. When you see yourself as someone emotionally strong, every challenge becomes a test you can pass. When you see yourself as someone emotionally weak, every challenge becomes a threat. Professionals build emotional identity deliberately. They rehearse composure. They visualize calm decisions. They act in alignment with strength until strength becomes natural. Brian Tracy's principle of self-programming fits perfectly here. What you repeat becomes what you believe, and what you believe becomes how you behave. When you repeatedly tell yourself you trade with clarity, your mind searches for actions that match that clarity. When you repeatedly tell yourself you follow rules, your behavior gravitates toward rule-based execution. This is psychological conditioning at its best. As you develop emotional dominance, you begin thinking like someone who doesn't need control, because control becomes internal. You no longer need the perfect setup. You no longer need the perfect market condition. You no longer need reassurance. You rely on your ability to stay stable. And this internal stability becomes your competitive advantage. The emotional mastery of pro traders is not loud. It's quiet. It's calm. It's invisible within their behavior. You won't notice it by watching their charts, but you will feel it when you observe their decisions. Every movement becomes deliberate. Every action becomes intentional. Every exit becomes clean. This emotional clarity creates consistency that amateurs mistake for luck. Now, you're stepping into the territory most traders never reach. You are gaining control over the invisible forces inside you. You are transforming your emotional patterns. You are becoming someone who trades from strength, not reaction.
Thinking like a professional trader is not one skill, one technique, or one mindset. It is a complete internal system, a system built through clarity, discipline, identity, emotional stability, and the willingness to evolve. Everything you've learned so far has prepared you for this final transformation, the moment where you step into the version of yourself capable of long-term success. Why do only a small percentage ever reach this level? Because most traders focus on shortcuts, while professionals focus on psychology. Most focus on quick wins, while professionals focus on habits. Most chase excitement, while professionals chase stability. The difference is never luck. It is the internal engineering that shapes every decision. The final layer of thinking like a pro is long-term identity. You don't just act disciplined, you become disciplined. You don't just manage risk, you become someone who respects risk. You don't just follow rules, you become a trader built on rules. Identity is the deepest form of transformation because it changes behavior automatically. Mark Douglas understood this better than anyone. He taught that thinking like a pro means embracing uncertainty without emotional disturbance. It means allowing probability to work without interference. It means trusting your edge without needing validation. When you internalize this, trading becomes less of a battle and more of a conversation with the market. The complete mind of a pro trader also includes structure in daily habits. Professional thinking doesn't switch on only when markets open. It starts when you wake up, when you plan, when you prepare mentally, when you journal, when you practice calmness. The market reflects who you are outside the screen. If you are chaotic in life, you become chaotic in trading. If you are structured in life, you become structured in trading. Your identity now shifts into someone who does not fear losses. Professionals don't avoid losses, they expect them. They don't chase wins, they let them unfold. They don't rush trades, they wait for alignment. This mental neutrality is not indifference, it's mastery. You are learning to accept what others resist, and acceptance becomes the key to growth. Here comes the strongest emotional transition. You begin realizing that you no longer need the market to feel confident. You no longer need a winning streak to feel capable. You no longer need constant reassurance. You trust yourself. You trust your structure. You trust your ability to operate with clarity, even when conditions are uncertain. This is professional thinking at its peak. The wisdom of Jesse Livermore adds another layer here. He proved repeatedly that the market rewards patience, discipline, and long-term vision far more than excitement or aggression. Professionals think in terms of seasons, not moments. They understand that mastery compounds. They understand that confidence grows quietly. They understand that their edge is not a single system, but a mental state. Neuroscience reinforces everything you've developed. Your brain adapts to the patterns you feed it. Calm repetition strengthens neural circuits of discipline. Consistent journaling reinforces logical thinking. Stable routines deepen emotional tolerance. Every day you show up with structure, your mind becomes more like a professional trader's network. It's biological, it's psychological, it's transformational. As your identity locks into place, you start experiencing something new: emotional freedom. The freedom from rushing, the freedom from forcing trades, the freedom from obsessing over outcomes. This freedom doesn't come from the market. It comes from the mind you have built through belief, structure, emotional mastery, and disciplined execution. You have now crossed into the mindset that separates temporary traders from lifelong traders. You have entered the mental space where consistency becomes possible. This is the moment you step into your new identity, the pro trader hidden within you, not because of a strategy, not because of a technique, but because of the mind you have engineered through belief, structure, emotional mastery, and disciplined execution. You are now thinking like a professional trader, and from this day forward, every decision you make will reflect this evolution. This is your new standard. This is your new identity. This is your new future.
If you're ready to transform your trading mindset, subscribe to Mind for Trade. We share insights, strategies, and psychological tools from legendary traders to help you survive, thrive, and dominate the markets. Don't wait for your emotions to destroy your account. Take control now.